Let's bring in Fox News contributor and former assistant to the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of the state of New York, Andrew McCarthy. Andy, it's great to have you here. What did you make of Mueller's statement today?
Well, I don't think he could have helped the Democrats more by anything he would have said in testimony. Basically, David, what he said is, if on obstruction, if I had thought there was no obstruction, I would have said so. As far as bringing a case, I couldn't do that because of the Office of Legal Counsel guidance. And in this system, it's for the Congress to deal with presidential misconduct. So, if you're Jerry Nadler, he gave you basically everything that you needed at this point.
Andy, Steve Forbes here. Why did you think Mueller capitulated? I mean, this is very different from the tone of the report, what he had told Attorney General Barr. Why did he cave? What, does he have a backbone of an eclair? What, he wants to go to cocktail parties with these people?
Well, Steve, I think what you saw today was evident in the report itself. I mean, it seems to me that the one thing that he was arguably needed for, I have to say arguably because I don't think we needed a special counsel at all, but the one thing he was needed for was to resolve the question of whether there was sufficient evidence to bring an obstruction case or not. That was the terms under which he took this case, and he was derelict in deciding not to decide that. So, to me, this is just more of the same today. If he thinks the president should be impeached, at this point, I almost wish he'd just come out and say it. But instead, we continue to play these inferential games.
Andy, it's Christina Parts-Nevelis. Before I ask a question, I just want to preface that we did see markets go lower today after the Mueller report. However, you had some algorithms that did create some of that initial momentum. So I'm concerned about investors going forward over the next 1.5 years that have to toy with the idea that impeachment could be on the horizon. But Andy, for you heard Mueller's commentary, the fact that he started almost with Russia, and I'm paraphrasing, pretty much saying it was an assault on American democracy, and then ending his conversation with Russia again. And the president has largely disputed or ignored Russia's involvement in the meddling of elections. Do you think that's the right move at this point?
Well, look, I've always thought that the Russia narrative about interfering in the election, I'm not saying they didn't do it. Of course they did it. But I've always thought that was really overstated. I mean, the Russians have been interfering with our elections since the Bolshevik Revolution.
But is that okay? And how could overstated just be okay?
It's never okay. It's never been okay. It's actually not been okay even before it happened to Democrats, oddly enough. It's never okay. But the point is, everything that the Russians did, Obama knew about in real time. In the last debate between Clinton and Obama, which was about 10 days or so before the election, when Trump suggested that the results might not be legitimate and he reserved the right to question the results after the election, both Clinton and later Obama went nuts. How could you possibly question the legitimacy of our elections? And that was under circumstances where everything we know about Russia now, they knew at the time.
Right.
Andy, it's Scott Martin. Thanks for joining us. So, kind of pursuant to Christina's question, we've got another year and a half, give or take a few days, till the next election. And do you think Speaker Pelosi has the right game plan here? She was saying they were going to continue to investigate, continue to litigate, and so forth. I mean, Mueller had 2 years, multiple millions of taxpayer dollars, didn't find anything. Do you think she's playing the right hand here instead of doing that, instead of, say, focusing on actually winning the election in about a year and a half?
Well, I think she is focusing on winning the election. She's got a hard job because she's got a very big divided caucus. Some of them want Trump impeached tomorrow. Some of them are in seats in districts that Trump won that would prefer that this whole thing go away. So I think her strategy from the beginning has been to play kind of good cop, bad cop. She's going to be the one out there talking about their positive agenda for the country. Jerry Nadler and Adam Schiff will be doing the scut work on impeachment. The question here is, do you really think this was ever about impeachment? I've always thought, just to line up with the progression is, I've thought the counterintelligence investigation was a pretext to do a criminal investigation without a crime. The criminal investigation is a pretext for impeachment. And impeachment is a pretext for the actual agenda, which is to make Trump unelectable by around the beginning of the autumn next year.
But Andy, how would that make him unelectable? I mean, I see the other side of it where it could actually hurt Democrats in the case of proceeding with impeachment proceedings. And I think Speaker Pelosi knows that and is concerned that proceeding with impeachment may actually rally the base and go against Democrats in 2020.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I think that's why she's proceeding cautiously. If there was a clear way to go here, like if impeachment was the obvious thing to do, I don't think you would see any division at all among the Democrats. But there's a real, there's a bunch of differences in terms of what their approach to this is. Some of that is because some of them are in safe districts, but some of it is because people like Pelosi realize that if they're going to hold the House, how the election comes out, obviously, the next time is very important. And this could go either way. If they are seen as overplaying their hand, it can blow up on them. So they have the luxury of time. I think they're going to keep their eyes on the polls. Let's remember that impeachment's a political process, not a legal one. And if they think they get some traction when they have some additional impeachment proceedings and hearings, and that, I think, will go, for the moment, that you're not going to get an impeachment committee. I think, you have the Judiciary Committee, the Intelligence Committee. They'll continue their work. If they think they get some traction, they'll go. Otherwise, they'll just try to bruise up the president.
Hey, and Andy, I want to go back to Mueller. I want to go back to Mueller for a second, because he said something that really appears to be contrary to the way our system of justice works. He said, and I'm quoting him, "If we had evidence that the president did not commit a crime, we would have said so." Prosecutors aren't supposed to prove that you're innocent. They're supposed to prove that you're guilty, right? I mean, to use the negative there, if we had evidence that the president did not commit a crime, then he should have kept his mouth shut, right?
Yeah, the most disturbing part about this, Dave, from the beginning has been the way that he basically turned the constitutional burden of proof around so that it's not the prosecutor's job to assemble sufficient evidence. It's now the suspect's job to prove that he's been exonerated, to prove that there's not enough evidence to charge. And that's not the American way. What's supposed to happen is prosecutors speak in court. You don't speak until you're ready formally to charge someone, which is the point in our system where you become armed with all of the constitutional rights to make a compelling defense if you have one. We're not supposed to just collect information and then put it out into the court of public opinion to taint people.
Andy, you know Mueller. You know of the Attorney General Barr. Why didn't Mueller rise to the occasion, make a firm opinion, and also, since he had a broad writ, or interpreted as a broad writ, why didn't he investigate, as Barr's now going to have happen? What led to this whole collusion business? What led to this initial investigation? In other words, the real story behind the story about the misbehavior of the CIA, FBI, the whole crew of them. Why didn't he do that and go out in a blaze of glory? This is a man who rose to the occasion, as I think Barr is now doing.
Well, I think he was powerfully influenced by the staff that he assembled, Steve, which obviously
why did he
sees a
assemble
blaze of
such
glory.
a staff that is all Democrat? So from the beginning, it had a political taint. Instead of appointing people, both sides would say, okay, this is an impartial group who are going to try to get to the truth instead of a political agenda.
Yeah, I don't know him well enough to get into his head on that. A lot of these people that he picked are people he's been working with for a number of years. I do agree with you that it's essential that we get to the bottom of the investigative decision-making that's been done. I think it's good that Barr is looking in at that. And I also think, if Mueller had regarded that as part of his mandate, maybe that wouldn't have gone so well either. Maybe that wouldn't have been as well investigated. I think it was fine that he just decided his mandate was this limited thing of, was Trump in collusion with Russia and did he obstruct the investigation? I wouldn't have wanted him investigating anything else. I don't think he did a great job on what he was called on to investigate.